Very humbling and very honored to meet you. I'm sure like everyone who attended tonight. What stands out is that you've beaten the odds in so many ways. And I think some of them are more obvious than others. But 14 languages.
It's quite a lot.
To me,
including
incredible.
Yiddish.
If we think the human brain,
How about Yiddish?
and I'm struggling just with Ivrit. It's astounding. I'd like to know, firstly, do you put it all down to God's gift? Or is there any genetic trait, anyone in your family who has linguistic abilities that you can credit in any way?
Well, my mother is not a Swazi. My mother was South African. All her family comes from Johannesburg.
Right.
She is Zulu, and you know, if you're a black person who's just come from Johannesburg, you speak Zulu and one of the Sotho languages maybe, and then Afrikaans and English, at least 4 languages you speak, at least that. And she speaks more than that. She speaks about 6. But if a person understands apartheid South Africa in Johannesburg, at least, a black person will speak at least 4 languages, at least. His own language, and then another black language, and English and Afrikaans. At least that. So, you know, my family comes mostly from Swaziland, and they only need to speak Siswati and English. They don't need anything more than that. So, in other words, my brothers and sisters now live in Johannesburg. After apartheid was dismantled, they went back home. I remember once coming into the living room in my brother's home. He lives in Johannesburg. I was listening to the news. I said, I don't know, what kind of language is this? I said, what do you mean? This is Afrikaans. Where do you think you are? Denise, Afrikaans. Maskebe says, well, you don't understand this. I mean, how could you survive in a place where you don't understand the language? Yeah? It was so obvious. You know? In other words, the change. You know, obviously a person wants discrimination to be ended. But Lamaisa, you look back and you think, well, how come it's not so great now? How come it's not so great? There's no apartheid now. How come suffering is still intense? I am not going to answer these questions, but people have to ask them. They ask the question. Oh, so we say we get rid of the Afrikaner, now we don't have any more apartheid. And they say, but how come nonetheless it's still difficult? People are still suffering. Why are they suffering now? It should be fantastic. But it isn't. Why not? Why not?
Well, I think the question is begged upon by the current trend, which has been going on for years, to accuse Israel of perpetrating apartheid, which is a gross insult. And I'm sure you'll go to the blacks who suffered under apartheid. But the outrage and the hypocrisy of a country that is 21% Arab, who are represented in all spheres of society, as you know so well, is an outrage. And currently, apparently, Apartheid Week in South Africa.
Look at South Africa.
Is being
how many of the Indians are Muslim? Very small minority. Most of them are Hindus. But look at their voice. I remember when I was at Wits, right? When it was Yom Ha'atzmaut. Arab, Muslim, Indian people wearing kafirs are saying, Hitler was right. 6 million is not enough. It's not enough. 6 million is not enough. So how is a person supposed to handle that? 6 million is not good enough. 6 million, that's all. Why don't you wipe them out completely?
Sure. To quickly change the topic, because I know that in the interest of time, it appears that the spark that lit you, the Yiddishkeit in your neshama, came from the Hebrew language.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Only when you studied it at Wits, you were attracted one day to someone who was studying Ivrit. And so would you say that the Hebrew language is the key to, in many respects, our spiritual entrance and growth in Judaism?
Yes, in other words, there's something
case,
in Lashon HaKodesh. Lashon HaKodesh, you see, you cannot really understand anything except through this language. In other words, the whole world was created through the language itself. And so therefore, it is the building blocks of creation. So if you want to know about the world, you have to understand what's going on in this language. What are the building blocks? Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, etc., etc. This is really what is going on. Obviously, today we have a different understanding of that. But the truth is, even in Yahadut, it's all about the language. If you don't understand the language, then we better teach you. We better teach you. We better teach you that.
And final point, now that we address the certain political situation that we are dealing with around the world of anti-Semitism, which I regard as synonymous with anti-Zionism. No question, I would say. Please, you agree with that. But what is the key that we as Jews should be adopting in delegitimizing the delegitimizers? And I think what's outrageous is, of course, this very essence of accusing Israel of a crime that every Arab country is guilty of. Apartheid exists in every Islamic society.
And they accuse us.
And yet we are accused, and no one's fighting back with this reality. Why not delegitimize the delegitimizers with the reality?
I'll tell you something.
They are the perpetrators of apartheid. They have to be eliminated in terms of
But who's going to give that over? Nobody's going to do that.
Right, but that's the reality to fight.
Look, it depends how you look at things. In other words, if you look at things from your human perspective and looking at the world and what people are doing, that's one thing. But if you look from a higher perspective, a divine perspective, one of the things about Sinai, it says that's where the hatred for the Jewish people came down. Sinai. They hated Jews from then on. Once we got the Torah, they already hated us. So if you see where the shorish things are coming from, people don't like it when you hear about a chosen. They don't speak to me about a chosen people. We hate that already. And we're already upset. Before you do anything, we're already upset the fact that you are one of the chosen people and we are not, and we hate that. And forget about what the politics. We already hate it right from the beginning. Even if you don't have a gun, we already hate it. I mean, why? There wasn't anti-Semitism before we got Eretz Yisrael? Obviously there was. There's a very simple thing, is that people will always hate Jews. They'll always hate Jews until Hashem finishes this business. It's not going to help you. You want to go and give apologetics, we're Beseder, and we help, and we this, and that. It's not going to help you. We'll hate you even more for that. Even more hate.
The question that perhaps goes to the root of everything I always bring up is, why did Hashem allow Ishmael to live? Well, of course, everyone's created in the image of God, so it's an easy answer.
Yeah.
But if we look at it in that perspective...
Well, the thing is that Avram Avinu said, Lu yichyeh lefanecha. He said, look, give Ishmael life. Ishmael was his son.
Yeah, sure.
And the thing is that the Torah says that Ishmael did Shuvah. But his descendants are the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
And we're fighting his descendants. Right? The fight over here is really, people don't understand it that way, but it's really a spiritual war. It's a spiritual war.
Right.
It's not so much about land. Who cares about such a little... It's a spiritual war.
Well, that's why I feel that this concept of land for peace is a fantasy, perhaps of all fantasies.
Right.
And what's so boggling and impossible to understand is the intellectual community in Israel and in the diaspora sides with this openly anti-Semitic, anti-Zionistic world, somehow believing this fantasy that land for peace can work, when we're told by the enemy that even if they ever get a land,
they'll still try and get us out.
They do not want to live with us. They want us dead. Abbas and company openly, and yet it's to deaf ears. And this is the intellectual Jews of the world.
So that's why I'm saying it's a spiritual war. It's a spiritual war. You cannot make sense. You can be as a big politician like Bibi Netanyahu, you still won't be able to put it over.
You know, the way I present this always to everybody, they have no concept of how small Israel is. Generally, the majority of the outside world. So South Africans that tell Kruger National Park is Israel.
Is it like Israel?
It's shaped like
just
Israel.
That's that alone.
8,000
just for wilde geiers. Wilde geiers. A plaats for wilde geiers is bigger than this country.
They say Kruger's what, 7.5 to 8,000 square miles, and we're barely over 8,000 square miles. But we must give back land, and we look at the size of the Islamic world when we know what they really intend, and yet this what I call left-wing liberal thinking is that just give a little more, and then they will change the culture of hate. They will suddenly love the Jews. How can they be so deceived? How is it possible to just give East Jerusalem back, and then they're suddenly going to love the Jews? Where does that come from? Where does it come from? Yeah.
The thing is that Jewish people, you see, we want to apologize for being Jewish.
That's right. Yeah, the political correctness.
I'm sorry, I'm a Jew. I'm really sorry. It's not my fault.
Right.
Please forgive me. I said, this type of thing.
No, it's just amazing, but phenomenal. Yasher koach to you and all your achievements. But again, I'm boggled. The language issue, I think, is the key, that you have an ability to absorb and to integrate these different languages and be able to converse in them. It's phenomenal, and obviously Hashem gave you.
Look, I'm just happy for everyone who stayed after waiting for me for so long. Everything that's important needs waiting and time.
Did you ever meet Rav Nachman Bernard from Oxford?